light within our hearts, light within our thoughts, light within our words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me on the show today, I have my friend David Slater, who is a spiritual intuitive and spiritual counselor. The topic we thought we'd like to discuss today is animal relationships. I have met quite a number of people over the years who have claimed to be animal communicators. And, beyond intuitively understanding, but saying that psychically they actually communicate with their animals, or with anyone's animals, according to some of them. I find some of them very helpful, and some of them I have to wonder if it's wishful thinking. I had one suggest to me the possibility of telepathic communication. At least with my dogs, I have not found that it works. Or at least that no matter how hard I'm thinking, I don't get any response. So either they're not hearing it, or they don't have the ability, or they're not even aware that they're supposed to be telepathic, if in fact that's the case. All that being put aside, though, is kind of a sensationalized novelty. Underneath it all, what ideally is to be the relationship between humanity and animals? Since we ourselves are a form of animal, I tend to be kind of down on hierarchies, but it seems in some cases hierarchies are necessary.
Maybe another way of putting it is, what is our interaction with them? For instance,
the character of the interaction.
The character of the interaction. There are animals in the wild that never come across human beings. Maybe that's less frequently now with the population level we have. What is their role? May not be something that we ever realize. What I find is, yes, there is a intuitive interaction. Oftentimes, folks will go to an animal intuitive because it's less personal. They think that
less personal.
Oh yes, because they think that the intuitive is going to read their animal and not so much themselves, and it puts a distance in the reading. Oftentimes, being read by an intuitive, seen by an intuitive, however you want to put it,
because they perceive themselves as being completely separate from their animal.
Yes, yes.
Which is usually not the case.
You have to imagine your pet, and to stay in that realm, is with you for a large portion of the day, and sees you naked, sees you eating, sees you singing in the shower, whatever. They see far more or experience far more of you than most human beings do, because we don't perform for them near as much as we will for another human being.
Meaning we don't put on the facades, the masks,
Yes.
the social mannerisms. The view that the animals have is much more honest.
Oh, definitely. Your tendency...
And even if you're not around them so much, you're still shaping their environment so that your fingerprints are all over the place, and they have to live within your fingerprints.
And it's an interesting concept. They are equally influencing your perceptions and your experience.
Okay.
Again, putting it in the simplest of terms, they're another being sharing your experience. They can assist in emotional interaction. It's not unusual for a cat or a dog to come up and snuggle you when you're crying. When 5 minutes before, everyone was just walking around the house and not necessarily interacting to that level, but the moment there is a visible or perceptible, however you want to put that, emotion, they'll go into support. And
well, or at least response.
Response, yes. Their response will be from yet another perspective. Let me put it to you this way. You and I interact because we've been brought up in a certain society. You say a certain thing, I'll respond in that, so on and so forth. an animal doesn't have those restrictions.
Okay.
So they
But
will
if I visualize him coming into the house and he doesn't come into the house,
very easily, from their perception, they don't see the importance of coming into the house. It would be similar to you saying to me, it's time you started driving a Volkswagen.
okay.
My response would, I may not even acknowledge it, because I see no value, see no point in that whole interaction. So they're out sniffing the yard, they're doing the dog thing, and you're telling them, oh, it's very important to come inside. And their experience says, no, the smell that's immediately in front of me is far more important than coming inside. The human...
I would still expect some, at least a bewilderment or some sort of response, some sort of something to tell me that the message even got through to them.
Well, what I would suggest is to keep doing the same thing and find any changes that come about. Anytime you work on an intuitive level, your experience of it grows. For
Okay, but are we making a mistake by assuming that telepathic communication will always be there?
all things are comprised of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets more complex when that thing is animated.
Mm-hmm.
What our interaction becomes with anything that's animated, and again, I'm starting real basic here, the more we interact, whether that be verbal, whether that be visual, or on an intuitive level, the understandings grow in all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go out and whistle for the dogs and they associate that with coming in, you may get a response sooner than going out and standing silently saying it's time to come in. What you believe, what they feel, what they sense once they understand that, okay, he says this, no matter whether it's verbal or intuitive, it's not a bad idea to come in. For whatever reasoning that will come through in that. What
I guess, and I'm not trying to be adversarial to
no.
the notion of telepathic communication, but I'm also trying to avoid saying that it's universal. That everyone can have telepathic communication with their dog, cat, horse, or whatever. I think it may be as individual as the relationships we have with people. That there are married couples, for example, who've been together for 20 or 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And to watch them do anything together, it's like they have become so in tune with how each other thinks that they don't even have to do more than give a look, and the person knows how to respond or what's needed.
Mm-hmm.
It's something way beyond sign language.
Mm-hmm.
I read a book about dog communication once, and the suggestion was that dogs may not actually be telepathic, but they may be so sensitive to the slightest shifts that they can even smell a shift in emotions.
That would make sense. Although, again, I find it interesting what I've come across, again, intuitive. One of the most remarkable, no, my apologies, there's been a few on this level, but had a dog that was with me for 11 years.
Mm-hmm.
Remarkable dog. I believe taught me all kinds of wonderful things.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I may have been projecting up into this point. At this point, she said to me, and again, it caught me off guard. This was a Tuesday. She said, I won't make it through the week, and I'm handing you off to someone. And
boy, talk about a loaded message.
Exactly. And I tend to be even a skeptic of myself. I'm like, okay, you're in perfect health. I'm going crazy, whatever. And what then occurred was by Saturday, she had a stroke. I had to euthanize. And by Monday, I met someone who was very influential in my life for 3 years following.
Mm. When you say someone, you're referring to an animal.
No, a human. that
Oh, okay.
took her place in a sense. And
Okay. So she was actually making a cross-species reference.
yes,
Okay.
and that's what gets interesting. Spoke to a cat one time and was asking questions, and I can't even remember the questions exactly, but his response was, I really can't speak to that because you don't have a purpose.
You don't have a purpose?
Have a purpose.
Was he meaning that your life has no purpose?
Okay, here's the perfect translation to this. What a cat or dog does, interaction with us, is a direct support or a direct interaction with us. And in most cases, as a pet, they're very clear in what they do. They're not worried about what they do for a career. They don't worry about a lot of the things that we worry about. They are in support. Your dogs are in support of you. Their purpose is incredibly clear. And a human being very seldom has that level of purpose in their life because we cloud it with a lot of illusion. And
Other than you're the one who fills my food dish, changes my litter box, etc.
Even if that is that incentive, wonderful. And there is a clear... And that's kind of the point I was trying to make in the whole thing, is that it isn't necessarily they're a magic being. Maybe they are. Again, that can be perceived any number of ways. But that they would have a clear purpose in their life would make more sense than a human having a clear purpose in their life.
Okay.
Because humans cloud most every subject.
Which I understand, and I don't see that as necessarily bad. But it's not so much about clouding the subject as about being aware of more details that the other may be overlooking. Whether that's good or bad, depends on the perspective. Because it may not be valued or seen as necessary by one, but may be seen as very important to the other.
Well, and where it came into an interesting perspective for me was I had the opportunity to work with someone who had a wolf rescue down in Cripple Creek, and how this grew about was the wolf reintroduction program up near Yellowstone has gone so well that many of the wolves have left, and because they've left, they've been at odds with ranchers or communities or whatever, so they'll get live captured. And she ran a rescue that didn't put them in kennels, didn't turn them into hybrids, but the 2 5-acre enclosures, so that they were still able to maintain, although very crowded for a wolf, a pack concept, but had not been tamed, had not been put on a leash, anything like this.
Okay.
When I was talking to her, because I was only there to set up fence with 5-acre enclosures, she has a lot of fence to raise. And we were talking, she said, "Wow, David, you don't just talk with your mouth, do you?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, then follow me." We went back into the enclosure.
Okay.
And like I said, wild wolves, their whole life, their experience of a human being was on the other side of a fence.
Which, of course, a stereotype would probably be lots of people immediately assuming that you were attacked and eaten by the wolves.
A lot of people would think that, and that was what was remarkable. We went back into the enclosure, and I also had brought my camera, a nice camera, and they got so close I couldn't take a picture. They were inside the focal length, and plus that night
Within 3 feet.
Yes, and I was also not wanting to be distracted because it was such a powerful experience.
Okay.
Their speaking was vastly different than a pet's speaking. It was almost like a very ancient speaking. Whatever they said, they meant, and meant to multiple levels. One of the first things they said is, "Oh, so you're not afraid to die," and not meaning that they wanted to kill me, but that innate fear wasn't in me. They had something to speak about. And the next thing they said was, "David, you tend to distract and diffuse a conversation or deflect a conversation." They said, "That won't happen here." I was like, wow.
Okay.
Right, they were
You've
very
just
to the
been given
point.
an order by a wolf.
Exactly, but it was accurate because one of the one of the many things that a human being will do is if it gets uncomfortable, oh yeah, hey, look at the shiny monkey, they'll try to diffuse or get away from an uncomfortable situation. They wouldn't allow that with me. And the final aspect to this that was very wonderful, the point I'm trying to make is a wild wolf will speak differently than a dachshund, or a
Which
kitty
would make
cat or whatever.
sense.
Yes. And what was interesting was my son and I were working there, and we had put feathers in our hat, and my son, being younger, had destroyed his feather and was looking for another feather.
Okay.
As I was leaving the enclosure, I saw a beautiful feather there, and I asked the lady who ran the rescue if I could take the feather. She said, "Oh yeah, that should be fine." I picked up the feather, walked about another 4 or 5 steps, and the wolf I had been speaking to the most actually grabbed my shirt tail. Actually nipped my tush a little bit in doing so, but grabbed my shirt tail and just stopped. Okay, like I said, wild wolf, he grabbed my shirt tail. Well,
if he wanted to hurt you, he would have done something much worse.
Exactly, and I was in his realm. And he stopped, which of course made me stop. I turned around and he had a very questioning look on his face. And immediately I said, "Oh, is it the feather?" And he grabbed the feather out of my hand very gently and spit it out on the ground and told me, "That's not what you're here for."
Okay.
And so it
Interesting.
was. And again, the communication is at a completely different place. And it has completely different meaning. And if I went in there to wonder how I could make money out of that, or what it would mean to my romantic relationships, I would have missed everything that was being said, because the truest part of life, survival of something that they are so very clear on, was being spoken. And it, again, if you go...
It seems to me most of humanity has forgotten that. A lot of, perhaps the majority of humanity, takes survival for granted.
That was one of the clearest things that, again, was in the very early part of the conversation. If I were transported 2,000 years into the past, I would probably starve. And you take a wolf and transport it 2,000 years in the past, it would probably hardly break stride. And so it's a much different life, and it's a much different perspective.
I had a woman once trying to convince me that animals should be seen as collaborators and partners, not as subservient species, which of course becomes problematic if you start looking into things like dairy farming or beef ranching or chicken farms, service animals even, dogs, cats, companion animals, gerbils, mice, snake. I mean, is there any animal that hasn't been made a pet at some point? It seems that all of those rely upon an assumption within humanity of hierarchy. And this one was trying to say that no, it should be egalitarian and they're partners and collaborators and so forth. But then we kind of come back to the old Dr. Seuss movie, or Dr. Doolittle, who in the old movie with Rex Harrison has to raise funds for a trip, and so someone gives him a push me pull you, and he sets up basically a freak show at the circus to raise money. And at some point the trained seal is lousing up her act, and so being an animal doctor who can talk to animals, he talks to her and she confides that she's pining for her husband. It has been so long since she's seen her husband, and she needs to go to the English Channel so she can swim to the North Pole and see her husband again. And of course, all of that, as Dr. Doolittle recognized, would not be believed by the owner of the circus or who owned the seal. Owned in the sense of human societies. And so he basically had to steal the seal from the circus and abscond with it to the English Channel and throw her into the water so that she could swim away and rejoin her husband. Happy ending for the seal, but it complicated things enormously. But the whole story, of course, was anthropomorphized. You know, that seals would have the sense of being husband and wife and all of the other expectations of human relationship. Nevertheless, it presents this challenge that if we're going to regard animals in any sort of egalitarian fashion, if at whatever point they were to inform us, I don't want to live with you anymore, how would we respond to that?
Right, especially the emotional content, that the feeling of rejection at the very least.
Well, and knowing that they cannot be set loose in human society without endangering their own lives.
Right.
There is a very real sense in which I'm responsible for the welfare of my dogs. I feed them, I make sure they have adequate veterinary visits, all that stuff. And I also set their boundaries. They do not go out without a leash on, which I know will offend a lot of people who think that all dogs should be trained well enough to be off leash. Nice thought, but I've been in enough situations where dogs weren't on leash that should have been, that I'm not in a hurry to simply draft it into law tomorrow.
Well, and not many dogs have read the municipality's rules and regulations on leashes either. So
yes, yeah, don't cross the street in front of a car.
Right.
Do not show aggression to certain people; they will not respond to it well.
Right.
Don't bite everything that offends you.
Exactly. We could simplify it quite a bit if we do similar to what's taught in Native American beliefs, and that is you ask permission.
Okay.
Honor it, whether it gives you permission or not. In other words, there won't be a legal document drawn up. There may not be a verbal acknowledgement.
Even if the dog does communicate, no, that's not acceptable, you may still have to say, I'm sorry, as the person responsible for you, this is what I have to do.
Yes, most dogs aren't really excited about getting a shot or whatever. But you can also, and this is something we already do, it's okay, I'm here to help, and you'll support. And if they're picking up anything intuitively, it's happening in your mind. So
at the heart of all of those types of relationships, though, is the basic fact of love.
Yes.
I mean, to me, if you're not going to love an animal, you shouldn't have it.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, there are people I've unfortunately encountered who have dogs for selfish reasons, and it's absolutely clear that they don't love the dogs. It's one of the reasons, controversial though it may be in some discussion groups, that I am really, really strongly opposed to feral cats. I think there is something about a cat being unloved and unwanted, unsheltered, whatever, you know, subject to cars, coyotes, pollution, garbage, skunks, everything you can name. It is just not a loving or decent life experience to bestow upon these animals.
Also add into the factor that we've been breeding them for centuries to be reliant on us, or us reliant on them, however it's perceived.
Well, and some people may say that they're not that reliant, but I find, in my experience, cats and dogs are kind of like children. Without appropriate boundaries, they tend to be a nuisance to everybody around them. There needs to be some civilizing of their behavior to satisfy communal interaction. And that applies equally to people, dogs, cats, everybody. You know, the world is a shared space. And so however we define the relationship, there still has to be a civility and a respect for the fact that this is not only my space. And in order to show respect for others, in order to receive respect for oneself, minding the boundaries and not being a nuisance to someone who simply doesn't want you there.
Acknowledging any relationship is a remarkable thing to do. In other words, if we eat a hamburger to fill the empty space in our body, that's what we often do in our society. if we take a moment, and as ridiculous as it sounds, thank that cow that we never knew and will never know, that it gave its life, it changes the concept of the hamburger. For instance,
Well, and it puts us back in connection with life.
yes, exactly.
And my mealtime prayer has come down to saying, may I live a life worthy of the sacrifice.
Yes.
To recognize that there is an interconnectedness to life. I guess the bottom line is, as we wind this up, and we've only scratched the surface, there is so much more to say.
Exactly.
To be mindful.
Yes.
To be aware of the interconnectedness of life, and I'm not a strict vegetarian, but I don't quite see the point of some of the arguments on that, because just because you can't hear the carrot scream, does that make it any less a situation of eating another living thing?
Because it is in fact alive.
Life feeds on itself, but it shouldn't. The interconnectedness of the circle, in my opinion, should not be done blindly, should not be done lightly, should not be done without awareness of a certain gratitude, awareness of the interconnection, awareness that how I treat other species shows what kind of person I am.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that's what it comes down to, our perception of ourselves.
In any case, I would love to pursue the topic more, but I'm afraid we run out of time. Thank you very much for everything you've shared.
You bet. Thank you.
And thank you for watching.